For starters, there was a monster that was undoubtedly a living creature. Since they knew it had to eat and saw that it ate meat, it must have been a predator, so if they prepared some food, it would react to it. The only problem is getting out. That's where he would need her help, as he wants her to cause a distraction 1 hour after he has gone into the castle, and should use whatever method she thinks is best. She was stunned as he wanted to go in alone, and wondered if he might be able to handle the monster by himself, and if he was worried that she would get in his way. The protagonist assures her not to worry because creating a diversion is a crucial part of the plan, so he needs her outside of this to work. He wants to ask her to do it for him. Ileana lifted her new equipment. Looking at it gladly, she assured him there would be no problem for her to help him. At night, the protagonist was staring at the location, and was startled by a sudden thrust produced by the pig falling behind him. He was amazed, as this was a nice catch, even better than he expected, so he appreciated her effort. The protagonist was sure that the smell of all that warm blood would easily cover the scent of the tranquilizer. He pierced its body, put some liquid in it, and asked Ilian about the status of the surroundings. She explained that the castle was heavily guarded, although there were fewer on the top of the wall. He tied the pig's meat and left to get to the top of the wall. The protagonist was soon out of breath and wanted his artifact to remind him never to climb a wall with a massive animal on his back again. Many guards patrolled the area, but the security seemed a bit more lax inside the castle. He saw the well the soldier told him about and assumed it was easy to sneak in there as long as he got the timing right. He went down and opened the lid of the well, and a strange smell came out of the well, which was indeed the smell of a colossal monster dropping. He suddenly started to regret his, but Memento instructed him to get down and cover his nose as the smell was strong. He puts the meat inside the well, and his artifact leads him to hurry up and get moving before someone sees him, and he affirms. He was startled as he suddenly heard Chelsea's voice asking the soldier if there was anything unusual to report, but they refused as it was quiet as usual, so he shouldn't worry. He was amazed as they expected him to relax while on duty, and was surprised as they hadn't lost their job yet with that attitude. He looked at the well but couldn't find anyone there, as Stetch was hiding down on the other side, so he turned back. He instructed the soldiers to increase the number of guards around the wall starting tomorrow. They can't feel anything happen before they leave for the capital in 3 days, and the soldiers affirmed. The protagonist was glad because he got saved by his automatic reflex skill, which had the best timing. Memento uttered that wasn't exactly what that skill was for, and realized that on edge, it's not like they are at war, though this guy is even patrolling in full armor. He was amazed as there hadn't been a rebellion, and wondered if people didn't know how to stand up for themselves. The protagonist doesn't understand why they are so eager to collect artifacts, especially since they keep them locked up in a vault. He entered the well going down, and Memento inquired how long they had to stay there like this. He wanted to wait and was sure the food went down there, so it would take some time for the tranquilizer to kick in. After some time, they assumed they had waited long enough, so decided to move down and jumped in the well. His nose was getting used to the stench as it didn't seem as strong now, and he was startled to see the monster sleeping there. As a bunyip is usually found in swamps, Memento wondered how they managed to bring them all the way there. The protagonist also agreed, as from the monster's look, he could comprehend that it would demand some perfect skills rather than money. He decided to leave the place because the tranquilizer was potent. He knew it wouldn't wake him up for a few more minutes. He knew that he would have been eaten alive as soon as he set foot in there if he hadn't given them the food. Memento wondered how the ordinary people managed to get in and out of there with a monster like that guarding the well. Stetch comprehended they might have an item that could control them, or maybe there was a secret passageway, as they didn't look like a pet to him, so he decided not to step at it. After some time, they reached a locked gate, which stunned him, and they assumed it might be their final measure of security. The protagonist knew that most people couldn't even get past those monsters, let alone make it this far. He opened the lock using the pin and wanted to see what kind of treasure that greedy Count Borden was keeping there. He was stunned to see the room shining with the glitters of enormous coins and treasure, but his artifact wanted him to forget about all that and look ahead. When he saw something covered up at another corner, he was stunned, as this was the place where he was hiding them all. He was disappointed because the dagger and helmet weren't even as good as Barich's. So, Memento Mortem decided to have them and used a cursed eating, increasing its mana limit from 850 to 3250. His active skill arc evolved into the Surge, and 2 new skills, including the functional skill Tesla, have been unlocked. The protagonist was contented as his mana level went way up, so he wouldn't have to worry about running out. He consumed 5 artifacts, so his current mana capacity was 9760. He looked at the list of skills, and the skills to be unlocked were Synchro and Scissors. But each cost 45,000 mana, so he had to wait a bit longer to upgrade, but Memento reminded him that 1 more artifact was left. He is stunned to see the bottle of liquid and wonders if that is an artifact too. Memento does not doubt it because not all artifacts have a specific shape. Some even exit in gas or liquid form. He tried to open it, but it was hard to open, so he wanted to figure out what to do with it later. Carrying the sack of money, he was about to leave when he saw the monster getting conscious, so he put his sack at the side using the enchantment on his sword. He rushed and stabbed it, pressing the sword deeply, but soon he was thrown back by the other monster as it punched him. The protagonist is amazed as they sure pack a mean punch, and he can't keep blocking them with just his sword. To fight both of them at once could be tricky, so he guessed he would have to get rid of one first. He was attacking it using the air burst, but his technique got interrupted, and he was thrown back. The protagonist wondered why he wasn't working suddenly, as he was supposed to be responsible for spells. Memento has just noticed it, but he thinks a piece of Dispelium is embedded in the underground vault's walls. They were so small that he couldn't see them without looking closely, but they seemed very effective. The protagonist inquired if he meant the metal used to make handcuffs for sorcerers, and his artifact was affirmed. The protagonist was stunned because that was expensive, and they figured out that might be what Count Borden had been spending everyone's money on, so they cursed him. Meanwhile, Elena sighed and squeezed out his weapon, which turned into a bow. She used the active skill of constant velocity, which disregards gravity and fires projectiles from long-range weapons at a constant velocity up to a certain distance. She wasn't used to using a massive bow like this. They were always Ada's speciality, and she attacked the castle wall, which stunned the soldiers. She was astonished that they didn't notice her as she was a good 500 feet away, so she started to like this bow. The soldiers were shouting and alarming the others as they were attacked. Chelsea instructed them not to stand there and locate the enemy. It was too dark, so they apologized, as it was hard to see where this was coming from. He instructed them to get into a defensive formation and guard the perimeter. The soldier informed him that they were coming from the woods. Judging from the direction of the attacks, they assumed the enemy might be firing from the woods. Chelsea instructed them to leave only as many guards as necessary in the castle, and the rest of them should capture the attackers and kill them if they resisted. Borden gets alerted about the situation and inquires what's going on, which startled the Lord of the Night as he shouldn't be out there because it's too dangerous, so he should go back inside immediately. He instructed them to hurry up, get ready, raise the drawbridge as soon as the soldiers had been dispatched, and not let anyone in the castle. She aimed at them as she didn't want to let them do that, and attacked using her skill Penetrable Shot, which increased the projectile's ability through thick objects such as armor or monster hide. She managed to break the drawbridge's chain, which worried everyone as the drawbridge fell. Eliana was a bit exhausted as maintaining the bow's mana while using skill wasn't easy, but she managed to secure an exit for Stetch, so the rest was up to him now. Meanwhile, the protagonist was rushing away and wanted his artifact to do something, and if there were no skills he could use. Memento wondered what he expected him to do as he couldn't use the mana there, and not even he could get around that, but this was an excellent opportunity for him. The protagonist gets furious as it is easy for him to say it is an excellent opportunity because it doesn't have to do anything. Memento wondered if he had to spell it out for him, and if this wasn't the likely situation in which he had been upgrading his gear. The protagonist was thinking the same thing, and he rushed at the monster back, stabbed it, and pressed the release button, which caused a massive explosion and killed it. The protagonist wondered if hat gunpowder, known as salamander dust, was amazed as it was sure powerful. Memento was surprised as the dwarf gave him the best sword with an outstanding boost effect. Stetch wanted to be careful as this could damage his hand, now if he would not alerted while the monster was rushing at him to attack. The beast tried to chomp him, but he hurried away and was glad as he was slow. Otherwise, he would be caught in those teeth. The protagonist pulled out another cylinder, loaded it into his sword, and rushed to the monster. The monster opened his mouth, trying to bite him again, but he evaded and rushed down and attacked its throat and cut it. The stench of blood disguised him, so he wanted to wipe it. This all happened because he didn't plan that ending very well. Memento was also irritated as he smelled terrible, but there was much that he could do about that. He decided to take what they came for and get out of there, and he reached out to use curse eating, but that didn't work there either, which frustrated him as this was such a waste. Memento was astonished as he took all that stuff with him because he still had to get out of this well and sneak past all those guards. He smirked as he had already gotten through their last line of defense, so he was down, afraid of anything else. Furthermore, he thought of a clever way to stick it to Count Borden, and Memento wondered what that could be, but decided to tell him about this later and left while wondering if Eliana was doing all right. Soon, they reached the place as he expected. There was nothing to worry about, and Memento admitted that he indeed knew about all the traps. He found a lever to pull it down and remarked that only amateurs would install something so obviously artificial on a natural rock wall. What is shocking is the production cost, as he can't even imagine how much money they spent on this, but that was all the tax money. A door appeared in the wall, which headed right into the castle. He was running out when he heard the soldier rushing out as the drawbridge was broken. He hid and listened to their conversation. They wondered who would dare to attack a castle in the middle of Benizia. The protagonist realizes that Eliana might have broken the drawbridge to help him, and he uses his animal instinct to hear the soldiers' conversation. Chelsea wanted all the troops to search the forest around the castle, because the enemies mainly attacked with arrows. They can't see how many enemies there are and who the area is, judging from the power of their attacks. They were a serious threat, so he wanted them to report to him as soon as they found them. He knew it was Eliana, although he didn't know how she did it. The soldiers were all spread out, so he could get around more easily. So he jumped out of the wall and saw the horse, so he decided to ride it. But he hadn't ridden a horse for quite a long time. On their way, the horse kicked the soldier in its way, which startled them, and holding his head, he wondered what was happening and reported others as he found one of the enemies. The soldier pointed toward him and instructed others that he just left the castle with a bag of stuff, so they should stop him. This was a perfect opportunity for him to ride back to the town. On his way, Eliana called her and inquired if they were done. He praised her as she did a great job by confusing them and explained that they were about halfway done, but there was still one thing left. Whatever that was, their enemies were getting ready to come after them, so she wondered if he would fight them, but he refused as they were heading straight to the town. They reached the town, and he handed the bag to Eliana and requested her to hold it steady for a minute. When he gave her the signal, she should do what he asked her to do a minute ago. He headed there while stretching and swinging his arm. He used the fireball and made an explosion in the air, then started shouting, calling all the serfs living in the town to come outside. The people started looking out of the window while he was reminding them that it was their only chance to break free from the tyrant oppressing them. He mumbled that if they wanted a fresh start in a new land, they should leave this land and use his skilled air bullet. He called Elena, so she tossed the bag at him. Using a small-sized air bullet, produced by the flicker of his finger, he ripped the bag so all the treasure and coins spread throughout the town. They were shocked, wondering what was happening. Chelsea appeared and inquired what he was doing, as those were the treasures from the Count's castle. After following them, they were out of breath and asked who he was creating all this mess. The protagonist wondered what the big deal was as he returned the stuff to its original owners and inquired if he had a problem. The knight's head instructed the soldier to arrest him, but soon he changed his decision and instructed them to kill him. The protagonist laughed as that was what he was expecting, and people like them made it easy for him to decide. He lifted his arm and used an ice wave to freeze them. They were surprised to watch him using the magic. He warned them they were not going anywhere until all the villagers had left. He could quickly kill them all if he wanted, but that wouldn't be nice as there was something he needed them to do. He instructed them that when the ice melted, they should go to tell that greedy Borden for him that he would come after him again if he ever did something like this again. The next day, they were far away from the village, but he was irritated as he still reeked of bunyips, even though he was trying to rub the smell off. The plant he was using is supposed to be good at removing smells, and he asked Ileana if it seemed a bit better now. This wasn't the first time this had happened to him because they had cleared most of the dungeon on the outskirts of the kingdom. It was time they started making their way toward the center of Benizia. He suddenly remembered that he found a fantastic artifact, which startled her as she thought he had given all the treasure to the villager. He was sure it was an artifact, but didn't know what to do with it and couldn't open it, so he didn't check what was inside. He was shocked as she quickly opened the bottle in one try. He wondered how she did that and was amazed to know that there was a little switch on the lid. He threw some liquid at his thumb and wanted to check what kind of artifact it was. He was astonished by its effect and thought it could indeed become helpful. He decided to give it to Ileana, but she was startled and made a strange expression that elves don't like artifacts. Stetch uttered that it's an artifact that boosts her overall physical abilities and could be very useful, which is excellent as he has been meaning to give her a decent artifact. She didn't respond, and he wondered if she didn't like it even though he wasn't sure about its taste, but he knew there was nothing wrong with it if she just closed her eyes and took a swing. Memento assumed that he might be dumb as he didn't remember when they first met after he mentioned artifacts. She looked utterly disgusted and cursed him. He was amazed as he had already forgotten about how elves typically react to artifacts. Furthermore, she almost lost her own family in a dungeon. He was surprised as he thought she would want to use an artifact after all these incidents. The protagonist apologized to her as he had almost forgotten and clarified that he wasn't trying to force her. Ileana was aware that her abilities weren't as good as Stetch's, yet despite her natural gift for magic, she could only use a few spells. She never managed to get the upper hand in that fight with those humans in the dungeon. Furthermore, when she was fighting the manticore before she even lost her grandfather-gifted bow, she was supposed to travel with him to help him, but she was always completely powerless at the most crucial moment. She wondered if she would help him, so she clasped the artifact and agreed to drink it. He didn't want to force her, so he tried to stop her as he could understand if she didn't want to drink it. She shouldn't force herself because other elves might never forgive her. She wants him to be quiet as she was the one who volunteered to help him, so she doesn't want to be a burden, but he promised that she wasn't a burden to him. She wants him to promise he will take responsibility for her if the elves reject her because of this artifact that shocked them. She drinks the artifact, and the protagonist inquires how she feels now and if she is all right. She could feel it flowing through her, maximizing all of her senses and detoxifying her whole body, and she realized this liquid was Amrita. The protagonist remarked it might be her body reacting to the artifact, and wondered if her senses could change. Suddenly, she felt excruciating pain as the artifact slithered through her vessels, and she forcefully clenched her teeth. The protagonist tried to calm her down and instructed her to take deep breaths because this was just how the body reacts to parasitic artifacts, so he didn't want her to panic. Soon, she lost consciousness and fell. Later, she wondered what those sounds were as she could hear sounds from every direction. With her ears, she could listen to the sound of even the most diminutive creature breathing. With her nose, she could smell the trees in the woods, and with her fingertips, she could feel even the smallest dirt particles. She felt like her whole body was being flooded with sensation, and she opened her eyes, sat and started coughing and felt like she was going to throw up. The protagonist is startled as he sees her getting conscious and asks how she feels now. She explained that she felt a bit tired until she got used to controlling the artifact. He knew that feeling all too well, so want her to let him know if she needed anything, but she uttered that she could smell bunyip on him, which left him teary, and he started rubbing the plan on his body and assumed that her nose must be really sensitive now. Meanwhile, Prince Reptors gets furious after reading the letter and instructs the man to tell Borden to try thinking about what he is saying before he writes a letter next time. Otherwise, he will get cut his head himself, and the soldier affirmed and saluted him while he furiously crumpled the letter. He was furiously heading inside when the giant of the East, Mark McDowell, asked what the matter that was bothering him. He was startled to see him and handed him the letter to see it himself, so he read the letter and asked if Borden isn't the nobleman who has been bothering him recently. The prince only humored him because he offered to send him some rare artifact. Why else would anyone bother with that useless old fool? Mark read the letter in which he said that someone had stolen all the artifacts, but the prince didn't expect much from him as people like him can never do anything right. What bothered him the most of all was that some jackass took those artifacts that were supposed to be part of his collection, which was a personal insult to him. Mark asked if he would like him to track down the thief. The prince was still furious as the thief humiliated him, a royal family member. He didn't care who that person was, but he wanted to find him and make him pay if it was the last thing he had to do. He pointed at him as he was putting him in charge of hunting down and arresting this person. He gives him permission to kill him if he gives him any trouble, but he wants him to make sure that he does this task. Mark clanked his armor to show his respect and assure him that he would try to bring him back alive if possible. Conversely, on their way, the horse was continuously whining when Eliana patted it, trying to calm him down and wanted to stop being stubborn as they would get killed if it didn't listen. The horse stopped whining, which made Stetch jealous, and he glared at it as if it was willing to listen to her, but not him. Eliana felt nice after being at the mountain for a long time, and he wondered what was so lovely about it. He knew that her senses were working on overdrive, but inquired if she could see anything. She refused, but she could feel everything she preferred. He took out the map and clarified that they came this way so they wouldn't be followed, but this area was a lot more dangerous than he thought, so he didn't think they could take the horse any farther. While he was telling her how to proceed further, she told him to hold on as she could hear something which sounded like the flapping wings. This startled him, so he used his animal instinct but could listen to anything with his skill activated. How could she hear a little sound like that in the middle of a valley like this? He assumed her senses must be extremely powerful now. She could hear the roar of a monster and the faint sound of people. Maybe the beast was attacking them. She wondered if they would rescue the team but knew it could complicate them if they were a soldier for another town. He wanted to save them and was sure that town soldiers wouldn't stray from the path and travel through such a dangerous place. Furthermore, they could defend themselves. The problem is how they were supposed to fight any enemy in all this mist, and there was the chance they could die if the bridge collapsed. She took out her arrow and bow, stopping him as it seemed the monsters heard them. She pulled her arrow and threw it at them. He found her impressive and inquired if she had killed it. He was amazed as the monster roared. She informed him that the people knew they were there too and didn't seem hostile to her. He wondered if they were soldiers and tried to see them, but she didn't think so. She was feeling unbearable pain, which worried him, but this was nothing and happened because she was just still getting used to this. So they could leave soon after her mana stabilized, and they crossed the bridge without the horse. At the same time, the people were helping their injured fellows by bandaging their wounds and giving them recovery potions. They were amazed to see the monster's dead body and didn't even know they had someone with an aim like that on their side. But they were the only ones out there, so I wondered who shot it, and the protagonist reached there. He explained that they were explorer, so he asked if they needed any help, and they were shocked at each other. Later, he sighed to hear that irritating voice again. Brian was expecting to see him there again so soon. He was pissed off to see him again, and inquired what he was up to now. What are they doing there? He understood that he was still uninterested in joining his gang and liked his stubbornness. He slapped him as he had become more robust when he last saw him. Brian didn't even recognize her as she had bandages all over her eyes and covered, and wondered if Eliana was all right. She used her skill, which amazed Stetch as he thought she wasn't used to the new power yet, but she was already using it and wouldn't even need to cover herself like that every time. Memento remarked that intelligence makes a big difference when it comes to how quickly people adjust to using the artifact. This made him furious, and he inquired if he was trying to tell him something. Still, he didn't say anything to him. He invited him to his hideout as they hadn't seen each other in a while, with the hope of discussing the possibility of working together, which sounded nonsense to him. Their base was a little rowdy, and his crew was in the process of restoring the swinging bridges. This was an ideal location for a hideout, so they had to clear the roads first and settle. This didn't sound bad to him, and I guessed that might be why they were hunting those monsters to clear the road. He affirmed that there were a lot of monsters around there, so it was easy for them to find food because they tasted like chicken. Elian felt like she would vomit, so she turned back. This amazed him, and he wondered if she gagged. He inquired what had brought them there, as he thought they had been going in opposite directions the last time they had seen each other. Stetch gets pissed off and wonders what does it have to do with him that where he is going. He tried to calm him down and was aware that he was not happy to see him, but wanted him to hear him as he didn't know where they were heading. But if they want to explore this area, they will need their cooperation, but he wondered why. He explained that the only way to get around Regia Valley was to use the swinging bridges or the tunnels in the old abandoned mines. But recently, some bridges have fallen apart from wear and tear, and monsters sealed off the tunnels. The protagonist inquired if he was saying they had to rebuild bridges first to cross and go to the village. But they didn't need to worry because not all the bridges were ruined entirely, so they could fix the ones that still had their basic frame intact in no time. But he needs help with the other thing. Stetch figures out what he means, so he agrees to help him. Later, he lifted his hand and used his skill surge, which fired a wide-range bolt of electricity with a low probability of causing fainting and paralysis at Humango. They got electrocuted and all fell. Brian was shocked to witness this as he had become stronger than before, so he wondered what he had been up to. The protagonist was amazed as this skill was more potent than an arc, but it used up a fifth of all his mana, so he decided to be careful and ended up knocking himself out. Eliana noticed he was tired and suggested they take a break to rest, but he refused as this was the perfect chance to test his skill, and he wanted to finish what they started. He just needed her to back him, and she uttered that up above, at a distance of about 2,300 feet, they were flying straight at them, so he aimed at them and killed them. Ileana was startled as she could hear the monsters growl far behind the mist. She alerted him that another type of monster existed. The monster roared so loudly that she knelt and covered her ear, which worried Stetch, and she told him these monsters were harpies. Brian and his teammates also wanted to help them as they didn't want to get them to have all the fun alone. The protagonist lifted his arm and instructed them to get everyone and stand back because this attack would be significant. Brian turned and urged them to take cover as he seemed to have a great plan, while the protagonist smirked as he wanted to see what those monsters could do when it's fully charged. Using his skill surge, he electrocuted all those monsters, which amazed everyone. Brian laughed at why he wanted him on his team. He instructed the coast units to check the surrounding area for the remaining monsters, and the remaining should be tend to the wounded. The protagonist uses a tremendous amount of mana, so he breathes deeply, which concerns Brian as he assumes he is overdoing it. He refused as he was fine, just a bit dizzy. They covered Eliana's eyes because she seemed stressed out by all those noises. Since they were done with the monster, so next they should hurry up and get back to rebuilding these bridges. 2 days later, they built the bridge entirely because they didn't have to worry about the monsters. They finished this much faster, thanks to Stetch. The protagonists admit they did work quicker and remarked that if they could keep it up, this could become a pretty decent place for people to live. He handed him the bread and said that because they got rid of the monster, they could continue to work there for a long time. Usually, they had to run away whenever any monster appeared, so sometimes they could get anything done all day. The protagonist was sure they would be fine for a day or two, but wondered what they would do afterwards because the monsters would come back eventually, and they wouldn't be able to use the bridge anymore. Brian explained that it takes about 10 years before Humango reaches maturity and starts hunting again, which is plenty of time for them. But Humango wasn't the problem as they had seen so many different kinds of monsters there in the last 2 days, and they were surprised that they had managed to last this long. But they already have a shelter built, so it was just a matter of time and patience at this point, and if they just put in a few more months of hard work, they will have a decent trade route and hideout to collect tolls from passers-by. His man rushed at him as they had a problem, and he wondered what the problem could be significant. He slacked off and left his post. But he wasn't kidding because those people following them were back. This shocked him, and he commanded them to grab their tools and weapons and be ready. Ileana wondered if that was supposed to be impressive, but the problem was that his artifact was so powerful. Each shot is comparable to a cannon. Its ammo is unlimited since everything around it could be turned into bullets. Depending on the use, it could even fire shots while in motion, and he heard rumors that he even carried out a siege against an entire castle all by himself. Memento assumed that he was saying it was a hard thing to do, and Stetch wondered how he knew many of the details. This was because they only did things that would make them stand out, using a dragon coat of arms, a dragon name, and even a dragon weapon. But most of what he knew was based on hearsay, and if they asked him, there would be only one reason why Garrod hadn't attacked there yet. This is because they haven't figured out exactly where they are, so he bets he doesn't want them to slip through his fingers again. The protagonist pondered that with this guy Garrod around them, they wouldn't be able to work on rebuilding the bridges. If anything happened, the bridges might even be destroyed, so he inquired if he was planning on recruiting him to help them and deal with these people. He acknowledged it because he was the strongest person they had currently, so that they couldn't do anything without him. He was going to fight for him anyway, but asked if he could at least pretend to ask sometimes. The protagonist sighed and uttered that if they got rid of Garrod, the rest should be easy to beat. He inquired if he could sneak in and assassinate him, as he was good at all that sneak stuff using his artifact. He was offended on hearing the remark about him and said that they wouldn't have had this meeting if it were that easy. Memento agreed, as he also thought it was not possible because his artifact uses an ability called a phase shift. It was against the law of the natural world to allow living humans into the astral domain, so there are consequences. The more time passes, the more pain he will be in every time he travels back and forth. The protagonist doesn't understand what he means and wants him to explain in simple words, so Memento utters that the longer a living person sounds in the spirit world, the greater the toll it takes on their body. The protagonist wondered why they didn't just say the initially. Ileana wondered then what kind of options they had for attacking him. Brian stated honestly that they haven't, although they have a lot of arrows stocked up for attacking monsters. If they don't kill him in one shot, they will just end up giving away their location. The protagonist asked her for her opinion that she could hit him from a distance if she was confident. The distance wasn't the only problem that she would face, as there were too many obstacles there in the woods. Furthermore, if that fails and she ends up fighting with his cannon with her bow, she will be at a disadvantage. He asked Shale if he could do it, as he could just put them all to sleep like he had done to them before. Brian uttered that these people were mercenaries who were fully equipped with magic resistance gear, so Stetch assumed that the answer was simple. This startled him, and he wondered what does she meant by this, and if he had a plan. He looked at his finger. He uttered that they have decent weapons and a good shield too, so all they need is a sturdy birdcage. Brian was confused, wondering what he was talking about and what his plan required a birdcage, and he smirked, thinking where there is a will, there is a way. Meanwhile, at their base, they were furious because every time they thought they had cornered them, those little rats managed to skip away. Garrod laughed and assured them not to worry, as they had caught them by tail this time and were sure that they would have killed those bandits at this time tomorrow. They could finally move on to all those other missions they had been putting off until then. He instructed them to drink up. They were enjoying, which worried the other soldiers. They paid heavy money to these mercenaries and wondered if they would work. But they have no other choice. In addition, they certainly have an impressive track record, so he wants sentries posted around the clock. They didn't like the enemy to discover their location, so they instructed their fellow to be careful when lightning fires, and the soldier affirmed. He looked at his artifact, thinking it might be hungry too, so he smashed it down as it was time for his artifact to eat. The soldier was shocked, as that artifact ate a whole chunk from the ground and was much like its owner. Garrod wondered where Jamie went, as he had always been a good drinking partner to have around. While they were drinking, suddenly, someone struck his artifact with an arrow, and he realized it was an ambush. His soldiers were shocked to see him getting attacked, so they inquired if he was all right. He furiously scolded them as if it were just an arrow, and told them they should stop wasting time and find out where it came from. He was startled as he could see his breath and realized it was ice magic, which left his soldiers immovable. He gets furious as they get some nerve and wonder who would dare to attack them. Elena was amazed to witness his quick reflexes as she was aiming for his head, but he managed to block it. Brian wants her never to underestimate an experienced mercenary and looks at Stetch, who is already leaving. He was warming up to attack because their surprise attack failed. There was no point in hiding there anymore, and he didn't plan to attack him from a distance anyway and wanted to fight heads-on. He rushed there, which amazed Brian, as he was really something else, and instructed Eliana to cover them. They reached before him, so Garrod remarked that they finally dared to show themselves to him and was pleased to meet them. He assumed they must be those bandits that had been hiding in Regia Valley, but wondered if it was just the two of them. Brian smirked and uttered that two of them were more than enough to beat him, and he preferred the term righteous outlaw instead of bandit for themselves. The protagonist frowns on hearing bandits against them, as he isn't even technically on their side and is just helping. Even that doesn't sound right to him either. The mercenary captain doesn't care whatever they care, but they made his job a lot easier, as now he will incinerate them so quickly that they wouldn't feel a thing. The protagonist used enchantment on his sword, pulled it out, and rushed to attack him, which he blocked using his arm. Garrod punched the protagonist, but he flew away using his reflexes, and Brian attacked him from behind, but was shocked as he didn't even make a scratch on his armor. Garrod punched him, but he used his skill to hide and rushed away, which startled him, and he realized that he might be using an artifact. He figures out that they aren't just their average bandits and gets alarmed as he gets shot by the arrows. He was concerned as there was another member and assumed that member might be the one who shot at him first, and wondered how did they manage to sneak up on him like this. The protagonist rushed at him, aiming at the center of his armor. He attacked with his sword, and pressing the release button caused an explosion. He coughed out, which worried his soldiers. Stetch supposed this attack should have gone right through him, but he was surprised as he pulled back just in time to soften the blow, and is so quickly. Garrod smirked and praised the weapon that he had, and he lifted his arm to show him its strength. The protagonist rushed back at his soldier, which worried him, so he requested his captain not to shoot. Garrod assumed that he might already be familiar with his tactics, but he can do a lot more than just shoot. He rushed to attack him and punched him, which he tried to block and got pushed back, and before he could get alerted, he again ran to beat him. Elena was worried because he was too close for her to cover Stetch's property. Brian was also not sure what to do there. Memento also praised him as no wonder he was the leader of the mercenaries, as he forced his opponents to go on the defensive to avoid damage from that strange artifact, and then he used his close combat skills to finish them off. The protagonist wonders if he would mind saving his admiration for him until after the fight is over. He attacked him against using his sword, which he blocked, and both of them were pushed back. Stetch realized that his weapons clearly didn't work against him, so he wondered if his magic would work at him. He used surge skill and attacked him, but he smirked and grasped his attack with his artifact. This shocked Stetch, as he was a much tougher opponent than he thought. Garrod figured that he might have more than one artifact. He knew that the artifact that he had just used must be a magical one, as he had seen plenty of those. He rushed to attack him, but he evaded it, and his soldiers wanted him to run them. He aimed at him as he guessed he might have seen it all by now, so he decided to use surge at him again. He wondered if he was going to use another electric attack on him, but clarified that he could use those skills all he wanted, but he wouldn't make a scratch on Spiratus. He admits that he has the guts for a bandit, so he wants to do an honor to him by sending him off with a bang, and he lifts his hand to attack him using the robust cannon. But first, he had to help his companion to escape, so he banged the round strongly, which broke the ice around them. He instructed them to move, and his soldiers thanked him and were furious at him as he dared to use them as a shield, so they wanted to kill them. Garrod instructed them to stay away because he was not messing around, so he suggested remaining out of this, or they would get themselves hurt. They affirmed and rushed out. He lifted his arm, aiming at him as he wanted to try again. Still, before he could take any action against him, Stetch rushed at him and attacked him. He was stunned as he chose to close combat to compete against his cannon. Still, he had a piece of bad news for him, that the closer he got to him, the farther away his human shield was getting. Stetch remarked that he is such a good captain, as he was worrying about his team, even in a situation like this, so he certainly deserves this title. But the protagonist also had bad news for him, because he and his men were already trapped in his cage. He was shocked but startled as he suddenly saw magic appearing close to them, and he heard his soldier moving to the other side, as there was something in the direction they were heading. He was worried about seeing another electric attack and wondered if there was another sorcerer around there. The protagonist remarked that it was too late to turn back now, as he was not letting a single one of them escape. He was astonished as he discovered that he had done this magic himself and wondered how this random bandit guy could be so strong. The protagonist informs them that if they take a single step outside the cage, he will burn them to a crisp. He used his skill Tesla, which creates an orb that automatically intercepts enemies within its range, and its duration varies depending on the amount of mana used and the number of attacks. Garad's comrade rushed back and informed him that they were trapped in there because of those magic orbs. He cursed him as he left him no choice but to kill and deactivate the skill, but his comrade rushed there too as they wanted to help him to take him down. They scurried to attack from behind, but Bryden appeared there and grabbed them, assuring him that he didn't need to worry about them. He banged them to the ground and sighed like a bandit leader who hurt his pride and fought small prey like them. He was startled as one of their enemies attacked him from behind, but arrows struck him and fell. Brian was amazed as she just hit directly for the joints, even from that distance, and praised her as her skills were on another level. But there was nothing to worry about over there, and as for him, big guy, don't even think of trying anything stupid. The protagonist alerted him if he could hear him. Garod cursed them, so whatever happened to fight fair and square, and attacked him. If he let manners hold him back in a fight to the death, he was basically signing his death warrant. The mercenary master remarked that he was wasting his time, and his skill wouldn't work against him. He figured out that there was a cooldown period after every time he used his skill, and he had to attack him then. The protagonist attacked him using the airburst, which startled him, and he wondered where he suddenly got all that power from. He can't figure out the situation as he didn't even do anything, so why is he starting to lose ground to him? Unless he had been holding back his power on purpose to back him into a situation with no chance of escape, he was amazed as he was such a cunning person. The protagonist instructed him to charge at him, so Brian rushed and kicked him, and then he used air to burst once again at him. He wondered who the hell is this guy as he had a strange weapon of his which could pierce right through his armor. He uses elemental magic that only trained sorcerers would know, and his skills rival his cannon without even firing a single bullet. This throws him back, so he decides to show him his true strength. After he stands, he sees an electric orb which concerns him, and soon he gets electrocuted. He started bleeding, and soon he put a sword on his neck, which startled him, and he wondered if he was going to die. Although he has the greatest weapon imaginable at his command, this is how he is going to die, by just sitting there like an idiot. But he refused to accept this, and Memento alerted Stetch as he was getting attacked, and he dodged it using crosswind. The protagonist was startled as he suddenly got attacked by his cannon and wondered what the hell this was and how a hand cannon could be that powerful. Garod was continuously attacking him. Brian asked him what he was going to do something about this. The protagonist instructed him to hold on as this wasn't part of his plan, and the mercenary master soon attacked him, but before he could do anything, he attacked his artifact. He was startled as there was something in the barrel and was shocked as he got attacked, which led to a huge explosion. Ileana appeared and remarked this was an amateur mistake for someone who uses a long-range weapon, and the moment he lost was cool, and now he was done, and his artifact fell after he died. They head toward their remaining enemies as they have to finish the task, which worries them. Later, they were working together, and soon they were almost done rebuilding the bridge. The protagonist stretches his arms and is pleased as all the work is done. Ileana inquires if he is sure that he is not overdoing, and he probably shouldn't have stood guard like that right after the battle. The protagonist was fine, as the people rebuilding the bridge were the ones doing all the hard work. The man inquired if he was heading back now, and he affirmed, so he informed him to get some rest and see the boss and bring her along with him, which startled them. Soon, they reached the camp, and he inquired why he wanted to see them. Brian was astonished as he came quickly and thanked him for standing guard. He had something important to tell him, so he requested him to hold on a minute. He wondered what he wanted this time and what had happened to those other guys yesterday, because he said he would take care of them. He explained that they disarmed them and sent them into the woods to let the monsters have them. The protagonist realized it might be why the monsters were so quiet today. Soon, Brian found the artifact, which was a little something from him to them. The protagonist wonders what he means as he is going to let him have it, but Brian doesn't want to be indebted to him all the time as he has a conscience too. He knew that without their help, they would have had to abandon this place and run away from those mercenaries again, so he figured this would be a good way to repay him. Furthermore, none of them knew how to use this artifact properly, which astonished him as it was quite easy to use. He wear the artifact to show him that it could change its size depending on the size of the bullet the user wants and could even mold itself slightly to fit the user's arm better. Garrod preferred using bullets the size of cannonballs, and his body was able to withstand the recoil, which was the artifact that made itself so big for him. The protagonist agreed as he guessed it would be kind of waste to shoot ordinary bullets out of that. Still, he wasn't sure they could use it either. Memento inquired why doesn't give it to the girl, who shocked him as he suggested something other than curse eating. He remembered that he came for Amrita, and now he is offering to give that artifact to Eliana too, and he wondered what gave him that idea. He sensed when they fought the manticore that he may be strong, but if he wanted to make use of that elf, then he should at least bring her up to a level where she would be able to help, which would be a kind of investment for the future. Because Memento suggested this, he agreed but wondered what she was supposed to do with this, and if he thought she would know how to use any other weapons besides a bow. Memento thought they should think about the rest later because he first had to give her Spiratus. He requested her to take out her bow for a minute, but before, he wanted her to equip the artifact first, but she didn't understand what he was trying to do. The protagonist instructed her to grab the bow after wearing it and asked what she thought and if it felt any different. She couldn't feel any particular difference, but she felt lighter than before. He explained that with the artifact equipped, she could use her bow as a shield if she needed to. Because the artifacts could create their ammunition, she didn't need to carry any arrows, as everything around her could be turned into ammo. Brian liked the idea and was certain that with her ability, she would get way more use out of it than any of them would, so it officially became her artifact. After deciding on the owner of the artifact, he looked at some papers and inquired what are these of use to him. Those papers look like the commission forms the guild uses. Brian clarified those were for him. Those were just some other stuff in Garrod's bag. He must have been one hell of a good mercenary because he had a whole bunch of commissions. H was startled as he saw one of the commissions, which looked like it was issued directly by the royal family of Benizia. This consists of stating that the client was Alfred Messer, who was second prince, and was on an escort mission to guard the supply train heading for the northern front. They assumed that the request had been rejected if they were not present at the time of departure. He heard that Gerald was the one in charge of the northern front, and wondered which route they were taking to get there and when they were leaving. Brian explained they were going from Gridlock in the south and passing through the capital along the way. But this commission looked like it was issued a while ago, so the supply train has probably already left by now. There were 35 large carriages full of supplies, so if he could intercept them partway, it would be a serious blow to Gerald on the northern front. The protagonist wondered how long it says they have to complete the commission, as they could use that to estimate where the carriages are most likely to be currently. Brian estimated that considering the size of the caravan and the fact that they would want to travel safely, they could very well be pretty delayed, as they would have about 20 to 25 days to complete the journey. He assumed they were planning on passing through the Regia Valley there and meeting up in the capital. He was startled as the protagonist suggested robbing them. Since he said earlier that he doesn't want to be indebted to him, he needs his help this time. Brian doesn't understand how they could be in a caravan that's already left. Stetch uttered that after crossing the Regia Valley diagonally, they would get to the supply route north of the capital before them and ambush them there. This was the perfect chance for them to seize all their supplies, but Brian was reluctant to get involved with the royal family, so he inquired if he was really serious about this matter. Although it might not look that far away because of a straight line on the map, if they take this route, they will have to pass through the most monster-infested area of Regia Valley, so they would never make it in time if they went around it, and Stetch questioned why there were so many monsters around there. Brian explained that one of the oldest dungeons in the Regia Valley is there, and the beast from that dungeon makes humangos or harpies look like a joke by comparison. All the monsters they have faced so far were weaklings that ran away because they weren't strong enough to survive there and were in danger. It was an S-grade area. The protagonist almost got worried for a second the way Brian told him about the dungeon, and was sure that he would beat it for him if the dungeon were the problem. He wants him to let him take one of his guys with him, but Brian doesn't understand why he looked so excited and if he cleared the dungeons too. Later in the dungeon, they inquired if there was anything unusual. but the man didn't see much. One thing he was sure of was that the closer they got to the dungeon, the more clearly he heard a ringing sound coming from the ground. He also noticed that the clouds all seemed to concentrate in this one particular spot, and aside from that, he didn't really see anything out of the ordinary. The protagonist was also alarmed because in all the time that he had been in Rajia Valley, he hadn't ever seen a single drop of rain, and yet the sky above the dungeon was covered with thunderclouds. He patted his companion back, thanking him for his help, and the man assured him that if he noticed anything, he would inform him. He rushed there and wondered what was causing those earthquakes and what kind of monster could cause something like that. Memento remarked it might be a deathworm-type monster, but the protagonist thinks it might be the Stone Eater and gets pissed off as he always gets involved with the hard ones. The Rajia Valley was filled with the kinds of rare earth elements that the Stone Eaters liked, so they often caused landslides because they traveled underground. He sighed because Rock Eater's outer shell tends to be immune to most metals and spells, which is going to be a major nuisance for him. He was startled as he suddenly heard a blasting sound and wondered what it was but saw Elena. He was shocked and wondered how she managed to split a big rock like that. Memento praised her as she was a real archer now. What she is wielding now is called the real bow, and her skill is perfect because most archer can't split boulders with their arrows. They were focusing on her as they were amazed and realized that she would fire another shot, so Memento suggested that he watch and learn how the artifact works. The protagonist wondered what she would shoot as she didn't have any arrows, but they were stunned as she created the arrow out of the fine particles and impurities in the air, which looked quite strong. He wondered how she could shoot something so heavy as that thing was practically a spear. She shot it in the air, which amazed him as her skill was amazing. Ilian uttered that she couldn't keep it up for long, which startled him as she heard everything, and inquired if it was hard to use. It was challenging for her to do this because she was doing 3 different things simultaneously. But she had to get used to this, and